Welcome to the Mental Space Live. This is the first in a series of free community events where we take the podcast on the road and film in front of a live audience. And what can I say? Thank you very much to all of our audience coming out. You are so much better than last week's audience. Thank you so much. That is a classic Bruce Forsyth joke from the 1970s. You know, millennials or Gen Zs, look him up. He's a legend. I want to welcome my guests here today. We've got three super experts in their fields. The first on my left here is Calvin Lee-Pickett, who is the CEO and founder at Calvin James Recruitment, which has a community of more than 175,000 following him on LinkedIn. I'm delighted to say that his company is also a finalist in the mentl Awards 2023. That's an initiative from mentl, which aims to honour and hero the work that's being done inside organisations to help people thrive. And we'll get into more of your story in a moment. Next, we have Charlie Spurway, who is a British psychologist, now based here in Dubai. You've been here 5-6 years now, yes?
Yeah, about 6 now.
And again, we'll get more into your story as we go, but you approach psychotherapy and therapy from a more casual rather than a super clinical approach. And then our hosts for this morning, on the far end, we've got Sam Harvey, who is the Chief Performance Officer of LVL. I'm also again delighted to say that LVL are a finalist in the mentl Awards 2023. I think I've plugged that enough just about now. There is, for listeners of the podcast as well, a gala dinner where all the winners will be announced on November the 10th at the St. Regis downtown Dubai. If you want more details on that, check out the show notes. So that's our panelists. What I'd like to do first is, before we get into any of the questions, because we're going to focus on well-being in the workplace and what really works, but I want to get a sense of you as human beings first.
Okay.
For each of you, and I'll start with you, Calvin, what has driven you to be so passionate about the well-being of your team and just well-being in general?
Yeah, so, well, I come from a sales background, so selling from gas electricity into the enterprise rent-a-car management scheme, which was heavily sales-based, and then into recruitment. And not everybody realises recruitment is actually a sales job. It's not just a service. So going through the big corporates, you realise that mental health just isn't really there. Well, it's there, but it's not sort of spoken about. It's not a subject. You just need to do the job a lot of the time. So as I went through my training, it kind of, you build that resilience to come into the corporate world and build teams, and you know you're all focused on yourself and your own delivery. So when I set up Calvin James in 2018, I wanted to kind of take the good process and the good training and work ethic from big corporate, but flip it around, creating a trusted environment within my people, which then should filter out into the clients that we work with. So it was based on building a culture, which I think is the heart of mental health in the workspace.
Yeah.
So that's where I've driven it from. And we're 5 years old now. We've had ups and downs in that time. We've had COVID. So there's been a lot of mental challenges. But through that period, I've realised how we can create a really positive internal mental health culture. Right. So that's what drives me now to kind of share the message on that.
Charlie, your backstory, obviously as a psychologist, what either attracted or what drew you into the field in the first place?
So I work with many individuals who have basically been having tough times since being in Dubai. And I think as an expat, especially when we're here in relationships or when we're here singly, there's a lot of stories here about the challenges that are present here within Dubai. And it was at this point from friends or people around me and my own personal experiences going through my own divorce that made me retrain. And it was about giving back kind of knowledge that I had learned and picked up on the way, and just to support those who are struggling here, because this city can be an absolutely incredible place. It's great for work, it's great for our careers, the environment, all of the things we know. But deep down, there's a lot of loneliness here. There's a lot of anxiety here. There's a lot of feeling disconnected from others, because we're all in this kind of rat race that the working world here is, because ultimately we are here to work.
Yeah.
And with that, the demands and the pressures, people I would like to say have actually lost themselves in places, and they become driven by doing task after task after task. And that ultimately ends up sabotaging themselves, personal and work relationships. And I got into what I do because I wanted people to start to understand and start to have awareness about, why do we do what we do? Why do we say what we do? Why are we running on this autopilot, arguably of self-protection, just to kind of keep ourselves at bay from the world, to keep going and to keep doing this amazing job that we're expected to do?
We saw research from Cigna actually that completely backs up what you're saying. I mean, when we look at the metrics that their wellbeing survey found for the UEE, it basically said in terms of overall wellness, almost world leading. But then when we focused on the world of work, 98% of respondents said they were suffering from issues of burnout. And then it's also interesting because right now we've got perhaps more people moving to the UAE than ever before. I mean, this is an incredible place to be at this point in time in sort of history and what's happening. So much economic opportunity, so much ambition, so much potential prosperity. But again, on the flip side of that, you talk about the loneliness. And we've seen research come out that we've seen the US Surgeon General say that loneliness is as bad for you physically as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So that's a really difficult place that a lot of people are actually finding themselves. Sam, as Charlie was talking there, you were just basically nodding your head a lot. So it feels like a lot of that's resonated. Can you tell me why that's resonating so much with you?
I mean, I'm fresh off the boat to Dubai, right? Let's start with that. And so I see how intense it is, right, with fresh eyes. And I came from London. And that place is mad, but this takes it to another level, right?
Kind of is.
There's a level of intensity here which you see where people are really, and we were talking about this before, that people kind of come here to work, right? And some people, you know, end up here and maybe stay here for longer, but there's this kind of intensity which comes with this place of I'm here to get ahead, to work, to hustle, to whatever, right? And as I say, I've been here for 2 months, and so I kind of, with fresh eyes, I'm like, wow, you guys are crazy, man. Like, just take it easy here. It's just interesting to see it through fresh eyes.
So fast. I see you're nodding as well there. Obviously, how long have you been out here working in?
I moved out in 2014,
right,
chasing my then girlfriend.
Okay,
because then now my wife.
Okay, right.
Two kids, and now
that makes it okay.
So your life goes into fast forward here. It really does, and that's, you know, you nail on the head there with that one. It's super fast paced. It's trying to kind of take a step back sometimes to actually, why am I here? What's the purpose of that?
So,
a lot of the time.
So why? I mean, I'm going to come back to you, Sam, as well. Like your why, about why you're so passionate to come back to the original, because we're kind of talking about the landscape here. But what about Sam within this landscape? Like, what's driven you to be part of the Level mission? What's driven you to be part of this well-being mission? Like, what's that human backstory that frames your personal passion?
Well, we said we'd talk about this later, but I'll just go deep from the start, shall I?
Yeah, why not?
So in about 5 years ago, I had a personal circumstance which really, you know, I fell off a cliff, basically. Didn't actually fall off a cliff, but lost a job, couldn't run anymore because I had a back injury. So I was a sprinter when I was younger. Right. And so, and Charlie and I were talking about this before, but I'd kind of lost I was in a situation where I'd lost a lot of my identity. The reason I lost a job was through alcohol abuse. So I got to a point where I'd lost my job. I couldn't run anymore, and I'm going, who am I? Yeah. Right. And I needed to make some swift behavior change. Right. And I was fascinated with, I learned in one of my classes in an MBA that I did, I'm fascinated with how teams work and the interactions between people. But what fascinated me most was that if I told people about that stuff, I created a safe space. I told the people about the stuff that went on for me. Yeah. Right. And so you said at the start of this is a psychologically safe space. I believe to make it a psychologically safe space, I have to take a bit of a leap and actually say, hey, this is what's gone on for me. And you all go, and I bet you all right now, when I started talking about that, listened a little bit more. right? Because it's an interesting thing to share, right? And so that's what drives me. And so for me, I really, like I said, needed to make some swift behavior change, figure out who I was and who I wanted to be. And so again, Charlie and I were talking about this at the start. When people say, who are you? It's like, well, I'm kind. I'm empathetic and I'm curious, rather than, I'm the chief performance officer.
Yeah.
I try and lead with that now. And so it took me a long time to get to that, of figuring out who that was. And so now, for me, it's about sharing that. And for Level, there's a real passion here to help people feel and be better. I mean, that's so aligned with what I do, right? Is okay, cool. I've worked as a team coach, I had my own team coaching business for a long time in London. And then it was like, okay, great. I love the idea of helping people perform and be and feel better through that kind of vulnerability and making psychologically safe spaces. I wanted to bring that here too. And yeah, that's largely what I do with Level.
It's funny you remind me, because about 3 years ago, when I was editor-in-chief of some title that will remain completely nameless, someone actually sat me down and went in a podcast conversation where I was the guest rather than the person asking the question, and they said, so Scott, outside of your job role and all the other roles that you've got, whether that be father, husband, son, who are you? And it absolutely floored me, because at that point 3-4 years ago, I couldn't answer that question. And it was like trying to learn that there's the things you talked about, that Charlie, about what we do as opposed to who we are.
Yeah.
What's your journey of discovery? You talked about retraining. What have you learned along that way? Because it feels like something good has come out from it's never an easy time when couples split up and get divorced. What from that period shaped who you are today and what you want to do?
Gosh, that's a hard question to answer, because
Do we have an hour? Yeah.
we have a time limit, but I would say the cliche is that the whole experience, maybe not the same as yours, but when we go through something that takes you to a darkened place, you've got two choices at that point. You either use that to grow and to heal and to be better than you were kind of before, or you don't and you give up, and then you end up being in this dark space and you hold on to, I don't know, being a victim, or you hold on to blaming, or you hold on to everybody's against me, and that will not let you prosper. So you have a choice to do the hard stuff, to dig in and go, okay, what was I doing? And one of the huge things I always say is every single person is 50% of any relationship they're ever in. So what were you doing without knowing? Like, how were you contributing to that? And that's why I love the deep dive stuff, because most of us are just spending our days not really knowing what we're doing or why we're doing it. And I work a lot with integrated attachment theory, which most practitioners don't delve into, in my opinion, deep enough. But the core beliefs that we have, or the limiting beliefs that we hold, ultimately might go back to insecure parenting. Maybe we grew up in a critical environment, or where our parents weren't acting the same on a regular basis, because they're human too, and they had their stuff going on. And if we've been brought up in this insecure parental environment at whatever point in life, maybe we hold beliefs that we're not good enough, or maybe I'm unworthy, or maybe I'm unlovable, or maybe I've got a huge fear of failure. And people as adults will go around with these rose-tinted glasses on. Everyone walks around with glasses on, and we see the world in our bias of our truth. But that's a story that we've picked up along the way as children that's running the show. It's running our lives. And until you've done a deep dive into that and actually gone, I've probably developed unhealthy coping mechanisms or behaviors, and I'm doing and saying things that I kind of don't want to be doing. And maybe I get frustrated because people get angry, or they shut down and close off. They can't communicate, or they have a tantrum and walk out. All of that is being run by this poor younger version of yourself, ultimately, that worked. Well, if I shut down, or I tried to get attention, I would then eventually seek out love. And that's sad.
Less than 10 minutes and that's me triggered. And the laughter in the room is basically everybody else is like, yeah.
There's a lot of nodding.
No, there's a lot in there. I mean, Calvin, your experience, and again, you've gone through that loneliness that Charlie was talking about as well. You know, like when we move from those home communities and come out.
Yeah.
Again, just, you know, and for the sake of the podcast, Calvin and I met because he runs a football team for young girls, and my daughter, tiki-takas, and my little girl goes and plays football with them. And you've always struck me as, you know, because your face to the world is super confident, super friendly, always seem good, but nobody's like that 100% of the time.
100%, yeah. It's and that's, you touched upon it. Everyone's got this facade that they put on a lot of the time. You don't want to open up straight away and say, "Oh, we do have these issues." It's not the way the humans work, really. Yeah. It's everything. Everyone asks, "How are you today?" Everyone says, "Yeah, fine, good." But it's not always the case, right? But it's just life. That's just where it is.
Actually, how are you?
Yeah,
like, I'm good. How are you?
And I mean, for me, it's a lot of the time the pressures that I feel with running a business, providing for a family in a different country. I'm the breadwinner, right? So I need to be able to provide, and that's the pressure that comes on my mental, is dealing with that side of it. So when we do the football on the weekends, that's my release then. So you do get the best version of me at that point. Whereas sometimes at home, maybe my wife doesn't. There's kind of balance. So she sees the worst.
It's now on the record as well.
She'll agree with you. She'll agree with you. But yeah, it's the move out to Dubai. It's exciting. It's exhilarating. You can really, you can do great things. But to touch on the loneliness side of it, I've got a lot of friends that have been here a long time. They struggle to build relationships, long-term relationships. It's all kind of surface level. And it's all built around whether it's alcohol or, sports. The way we're kind of conditioned as in my culture from the UK, you'll know this, it's every social event is around alcohol, which I think is completely wrong. So we've kind of made a choice in Calvin James that any event we do moving forward this year, we're not doing alcohol-related activities. So we're doing, either something that's a bit more challenging physically or something fun. Like we went on a boat last week and did donuts. Don't know if anyone's seen my LinkedIn post, probably have. But that's, for me, is you build a much deeper relationship with your team, first of all, and with, your social connections outside of that. So it should then hopefully create better relationships to attack that loneliness part of it, which are a bit more deeper, I'm
going to stay with the individual because, the podcast is supposed to be kind of almost like getting into the world of work and perhaps having a bit more of a macro conversation. But let's stay, because each of us are individuals inside the workspace. And I think Calvin, what you said there as well is like, if we look at, it seems to me that so often we put ourselves at the end of that process. When we talk about the responsibilities, again, you talked about, if you're in management, you've got responsibility to the P&L, you've got responsibility to your boss or your shareholders, to your team, then to your partner, then to your children, then to the rent or the mortgage, which keeps going up, and then to school fees and that sort of thing. And we often think we take care of all of that, and then we take care of ourselves and we put ourselves right at the end of the process. And yet all of those responsibilities fall by the wayside if you fail. So individuals' responsibility, or individuals, how important it is for individuals to recognize that they need to almost like put themselves first, and actually self-care is not necessarily selfish. Where do you stand on that the individuals have a responsibility to work on themselves and look after themselves before they even walk through the threshold of the workplace? Sam, I'll come to you first.
Okay. I have an interesting take on that because I actually believe that helping yourself can be helping others. Yeah. So I agree. You need to look after yourself and make sure you're in a place where you can first. But I know from experience that actually what can fuel me is doing something for someone else. Yeah. And so one of the most simple things, that I learned from my time in London was that if I'm in my own head, I go and pick up rubbish. Yeah, and it's like, it might sound silly, but it's just doing something for, the world, whatever. Yeah. And it's like, okay, actually, 100%. You can do that for the rest of your life, couldn't you, in London? But yeah, it makes me feel better. And so while I agree with you, yes, you need to make sure you're in a good spot. Like if you're completely broken, and then it's going to be very tough to do that. But I've noticed how helping others can actually make me feel a lot better.
Is that a form of self-care for you, though? The fact
For
that
sure.
yeah. I was not as easy here in Dubai because it's so clean, so a lot less rubbish picking up. And
for me, I mean, you know, like I know of lots of people who are in the position that I was in, so I call them. Yeah, that's my form of that, right? It's like, how you doing? You know, I will call, check in, make sure that, you know, these guys of all ages, and I'm like, how are you? You know, that's my form of self-care, because it's I know what it's like to be there, and it's awful.
Yeah. So Charlie, I'm going to get your take.
Yeah, I think I've got 2 answers for this. But when I deal with clients, so often, yes, self-care is the responsibility of the individual to, you know, learn about themselves to be better, and how we perceive a situation to be. We can see the positive or we can see the negative. But I think when we're talking about a workplace perspective, there's a lot of leaders and there's a lot of managers out there who are in this rat race themselves, and they're almost not being human when they're in the workplace, because they have all of these pressures themselves to adhere to the people above them. And I think sometimes leaders, managers, even co-workers sometimes get lost within that, and they lose themselves within that, and then they stop being humane in that. And if we aren't truly having those social interactions, getting to know people for being people, and we're just seeing them as a number, or we're seeing them as a replaceable entity that, oh, okay, well, we'll create burnout in you, and then, you know, you'll leave, and then we'll get someone else in. And I think in Dubai, that's why everyone lives sometimes in fear, because I think that everyone knows that they're replaceable and they're just a number. And I feel that in the workplace, especially from what my clients articulate to me, is they just feel that nobody cares about them. You know, they might have minimal validation, or they might have a work environment where they're not working at their optimum because managers and leaders aren't maybe recognizing what they need as individuals on a personal level to make them perform the best they can.
Yeah.
So I think it's a joint responsibility. I think it does need to come from that top-down approach, and also the individual's responsibility as well.
It's a fascinating point you make, because if we look at actually the UAE, and often like from the UK, sometimes the private sector innovates and then the public sector lags so far behind. If we actually look at what the UAE has been doing in terms of well-being, you know, when it went to a 4.5 working day week, it put it to black and white that work-life balance and well-being mattered. It said it in, you know, in print from the government literature. And then we look at, you know, we talk about hierarchies of fear inside private companies. And we've had the law change. We've now got 10-year golden visas. We've got 5-year golden visas. We've now got gratuity changes coming in, which loosen the employer's power over your gratuity. We've now got unemployment insurance, and we've had a revamping of the labour laws. So it's now easier for employees who feel they've been treated unfairly to take their employers to court. And believe me, I know about it, because I've been down that road and actually won. And found it, while it's not an easy process, it was, I'm so glad I did it, because we stood up for ourselves. So the public sector, the government is saying, we want talent, we want to be the happiest place on the planet. Calvin, I'm going to come to you, because it feels like out there in the private sector, we've got some really good companies, and these are the good companies that actually we're trying to highlight in the Mentl Awards 2023. But there is still a lot of companies there that still rely on that hierarchy and that fear-driven, rather than the positivity, rather than creating the culture that you've all talked about. You are a leader inside your organization, but then you're also sitting down with C-suites, because you find talent and you are placing that talent within companies. What are the kind of conversations? What are you seeing? What's going right? What's going wrong? Particularly when, again, and I do talk a bit too much for a podcast host, so I should just shut up. But again, we had ask my wife. But we did have Cigna research as well that's saying now 55% of respondents in that piece of research they did were looking for a better job, or looking for another job with a better work-life balance. And they went back year after year, and 80% of the people who said they were going to leave. So actually in this market, with all this prosperity that's going on, with all these opportunity, actually talent has a choice.
Yeah, I've got candidates I'm speaking to today that I was speaking to when I moved out in 2014 that have never really found the place that they want to be in for long-term, job-wise. And anyone I speak to candidate-wise that's looking to make a move or to relocate to the region, I say straight up, it's a bit of a minefield culturally. Yeah. From company to company. It's because it's such a diverse population here, expat population, the different cultures bring different ways of working as well. So it is really, whenever I go through a process, I always flip the process as well. So the candidate who's looking for that job, you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. Yeah. Because you don't want to be calling me again in 6 months saying, Calvin, this is not what I expected. Yeah. So again, we're consulting on both sides. So when I'm speaking to clients, they're still getting pressured to get someone that can add value straight away. And that is, you can't take that away. So it's not just a simple, let's make it more flexible and everyone's going to want to work for us, because there's still, you've got to change the leadership mentality. And again, different generation by generation will have different ways of views on what's a benefit and what's not a benefit, which we'll probably talk about later. But so what I see that isn't working at the moment is companies running on a basis where you've got to earn your trust rather than you've got it to lose. Yeah. If you know what I mean. Yeah. So for instance, I've worked with clients where we've gone through the whole process and they've found this really senior candidates for the role. They want to make the offer, but then before they make the offer, they want to see the pay slips just to make sure that it is what they say it is. So instantly you're starting on the negative. Rather than welcome them in, you just let me just check. You said the references will do that, but that's all part of it. And that's what doesn't work, is when you're starting off on a negative distrust. Let's just double check you are who you say you are on that side of it. So there's ways of doing that, and that's why you use an agency to provide with people that have been referenced and what have you. So we try and consult as best as we can. So that side doesn't work. Yeah. What I've seen other companies do, more forward thinking off the back of COVID, it's made it easier, is the flexibility. And that flexible working environment, whether there's a company I work with that do work from anywhere. Yeah. For 1 month every year. That's a big benefit now for people, which doesn't cost the company anything. But then there's a lot of companies that are still against it because there's a lack of trust.
I think I'm going to tag Sam in here as well, because that is really interesting. When you say it doesn't cost the company anything, I think sometimes there is almost, I don't know, like a psychology in leaders' minds that if they can't see the individual in front of them, it's about distrust. They don't trust that individual is going to perform for them. I mean, if we look at level, I know that you guys have unlimited leave, you have flexible working, you have all sorts of benefits. And I think I'm going to ask you to tell us like what you do for level and what you do for your team at level, because it's quite sort of market leading in many ways. And you'll have a deluge of CVs after this podcast, including mine, is some of the benefits. I'm only surprised you've not got a steam room and a jacuzzi in that. But tell us some of the things that you guys do here at Level to foster that, and why you do it. And the last question, and then I'll shut up and let you answer. And what do you think the ROI of that has been for Level?
3 really good stacked questions.
In order, please.
I want to start with what was going on for me when Calvin was speaking. It was about co-created culture. I think there are a lot of perks we can put in front of our teams now. Flexible working is one of them. 4.5-day week. We do a thing called Recharge Fridays. So every Last Friday of the month is completely off. And in fact, tomorrow is our Recharge Friday. Get in. And they are perks, right? Like they are things which employees enjoy and the team members enjoy, that which we want to promote. The biggest thing from my perspective is asking them what they want. What do you feel like is going to actually help you perform better? what do you actually want to see in a workplace, and actually having that conversation. Then people get that sense of autonomy in their work, right? And that's when there is a conversation around freedom of choice, you move people towards a reward response rather than to a threat response, which is micromanagement and overseeing every moment of their day. We as leaders need to try and move people as often as we can to a reward response. And so that's, public praise, clear goals, mentoring and coaching, transparency, the opposite of which moves people into a threat response, which really, makes them, that erodes psychological safety, right? So perks are all lovely and it's great to have them, but that, in my opinion, is the bedrock.
What's fascinating is you just detailed 4 you think of foundational things of any psychological safe culture. I don't think any of them cost a business a single dirham. We look at perks and we look at there was a really interesting piece by Oxford University recently that looked at all of these perks, whether it be, you've got this, you've got that. Often we talk about the pool table in the middle of the room that nobody dare play on. And Charlie, I'm going to come to you as well. Like the need for employers to understand what's going on, what's driving, what's going on inside employees, and how that helps the business overall.
Yeah, so building on from what you were just saying, I think there needs to be a level of training by people like myself, especially to leaders and managers, about how people fire and wire, because, we've all know the co-worker who might be super clingy, super needy, over chatty, over gossiping, always seeking validation because they have a fear of maybe not being good enough, right? Or then you've got the other co-worker who is quite hot and cold, quite rational, quite logical, maybe not a big communicator. Everyone kind of just leaves them to it because they don't want to be kind of on eggshells. Maybe they work better independently. So when we're talking about how to optimize our employees, if we don't know how they fire and they wire, how can we best manage them? How can we best support them? Because, for example, that person who likes to shut down, they might be amazing on solo projects. That's where they might shine. Yeah. Whereas somebody who, has that clingy neediness behavior, they will thrive in teamwork situations because they like to and thrive off of bouncing ideas off others. But if you're trying to make those two people work in the opposite space, well, you're going to create unmet needs. You're going to therefore end up sabotaging not only the individual but also the project, because people are working in a space that doesn't best suit them. And then there's that idea of, well, my actual fundamental needs aren't being met. I'm not being true to myself. Then that leads to that internal negative spiraling downturn where our limiting beliefs are firing and functioning quite often. So then potential stress comes in, then potential anxiety comes in. And then if you've got somebody always wanting to say yes because they want to be the people pleaser, then they're going to lead to burnout and they're going to lead to stress. So going back to your original question, the employer or the leader or the manager, in my opinion, has a huge responsibility of trying to understand the psyche of their workers, because if you're forcing them into situations or team environments or solo environments where they genuinely have negative self-limiting beliefs about that, well, you're failing as a manager to be supportive. And yes, it is down to the individual to sort their baggage out, should we call it, as well. But it's a responsibility of both the employer and employee to make that optimum performing space.
I'm just going to return to Sam for a second, Calvin. I want to get your thoughts. Okay. If he nodded any more vigorously, I feel his head would drop off. The world was shining to say that. So why was that resonating so strongly with you? And I also wanted to come back onto part 2 or part 3 of my very long-winded question, which was, what's the ROI that you have seen for Level from those 4 things that actually don't cost, but actually need that transformation within the leadership to embrace?
I think what resonates strongly with me about that is that I really, there is responsibility on both, but I think what we see a lot is, especially in kind of startups and scale-ups, is this task is good. And so I'm going to give you more because it's, you know, I'm a CEO or a you know, whatever CPO, I'm a C-suite I've got loads of things to do, and I'm going to dump all of them on you, and then I'm going to go. And that inability to kind of regulate that portion of it overloads team members. That's when they get into the stress, they tip over the stress curve, they go into anxiety, they haven't got the resources to actually do what they need to do. And that's when you burn your employees out. Yeah. And to the second part of your question, so ROI, I mean, the main thing is we have a team which feels they can speak up. And so things happen faster for us because people say, actually, this is what I see, and I'm going to bring it up right now because X. You know, rather than I can't speak up. There's a very good psychologically safe space at level where all of our team members, and I've seen it, you know, will speak up. You know, when I was organising an offsite recently, I had a couple of people who came to me like, dude, what are you doing on the last day? Like, that's rammed. Can we call it a bit? And I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, thank you, right? And so there's that for me is the speed is the return on investment. We can actually move, and there's no kind of worry about am I hurting someone's feelings? We just move quickly. Yeah. And for me, that is that's going to make us a more efficient, more productive business, right?
That's fascinating because I've heard that phrase. It's going to be interesting because I've heard the phrase move quickly before, but it's often said move quickly and break things. But when it comes to people, is it possible to kind of move quickly and be agile and not break people? I mean, Calvin, how have you fostered that psychological safety within your teams, and how's that come from your values as an individual? Yeah,
so I mean, for me, it's similar to what you were saying then was... It's knowing your people. And when I was year 2, year 3 of the business, I was like, right, we need to scale it up. We need to hire more people. Yeah. I probably hired the wrong people at that time because I didn't delve into who they were and what type of culture I was trying to build. Yeah. So by knowing the people you're bringing in, you're taking more time and giving them time as a smaller organization. Yeah. Anyone that comes into our business, I want to make sure they've got a lot of time with me to understand, okay, what we want from the company, what they want. To generate from it. Is it what your goals are? Yeah. You know, do you want flexibility? Do you want work remotely? All these elements of understanding what makes you tick is what I feel builds a really strong internal culture for the business. And I've seen the bad side, like the ones that don't work. Yeah. And then we've changed. We've got, right, okay, I need to change me. Yeah. I need to change what my vision is for the business. So we changed from a fully remote business, which was 2018 before COVID. We decided to do, you know, when I set it up, you've got your laptop, your phone, you work from anywhere. We'll have a central hub, we'll meet up once a month. But as a startup business, it was hard to build a culture. I didn't realize that till year 2 or 3, and I was like, we've got no culture here. So then we got an office now, which again, the common consensus now, people want the flexibility still, which we still have, but we've got a central hub where we're building a culture. Where it is that safe place to come in, we have that chat, we understand what everyone else's business is doing. And a sales-based team, a sales-based business needs energy. So we're not tech coders where you can just sit in Bali for 6 months, not speak to a single person.
That sounds like a really good job.
Yeah. But, you know, for us, that doesn't work.
We're thinking all is resonating with that.
Yeah, everyone wants that, yeah. So for us, it's about, we're a people's business. And if you look on my website, it says it, people-focused approach for people's business. So we need to be around people all the time, but then it's understanding our people. And then once you've got that, which I feel like we're getting to a point now where we're really close as a team, then the results come, not just for them and their individual.
The ROI.
Yeah, so their individual goals. Like, for instance, one of my first hire was a guy from real estate, Sam Harvey. He's not here today, but he said to me, I want to buy a house. I want a bit more stability. Real estate's great, but it's just a bit up and down. He came in, and within 2 years, he bought his house. And he still works remotely because he learned how to recruit during COVID when we had no choice. So he still likes that remote piece. So anyway, it's understanding the goals and then trying to work a plan to get to it. It's probably easier on a smaller scale. Bigger companies around there, whether it's the family groups, the multinationals, it's harder to change that.
But it is possible.
It is. It takes time. But the fundamentals come down to who are your leadership? Are they in line with the vision of the business and where you want to get to.
See, that's fascinating because there was a big piece of McKinsey research, I think it was about 7-8 months ago, which talked about this kind of 10 transformational shifts that leaders need to embrace if they wanted their businesses to thrive the next decade going forward. 6 of them were focused on emotional intelligence. And one of them very, very specifically said that leaders need to go on their own transformational journey and actually have that conversation inside. I'll come to you, Charlie, because a lot of your work is about, you've helped men and women with their relationship with themselves. And we often get into boss bashing when we talk about well-being in the workplace. But from your perspective, how important and how rewarding is it for leaders, but also just individuals, to have that conversation with themselves, to develop that relationship with themselves?
Honestly, hugely. I think, again, if you haven't had a therapist, get a therapist, because what you will do in 3 months will change your outlook on things and how you are for the greater. It will make you realize what you do, maybe why you think. It will help you develop healthier emotional regulation, healthier behaviors, healthier patterns. But the big one is you can start to be more empathetic to others because you've gone into your uncomfortable stuff, that place in your mind that isn't really that great, right? You're smiling like maybe, it is those negative core beliefs that we hold about ourselves, and everybody does. Yeah. And when we've unpicked that and we can go, oh, why is that person acting in that way? Or why are they doing or saying that? And actually, when we've done therapy work, we can start to be more empathetic. We have more emotional intelligence. We have the awareness where we can go, okay, that person's not angry.
Yeah. There's something
going on there. They're really hurting. Yeah. Actually, whenever there is a huge emotional response, that person is in pain. And if you as a leader or a coworker can actually recognize that they're not just trying to be a pain, right, in the situation, or they're not trying to create conflict, there's something going on there, it just makes us better communicators. It makes us better humans, better partners, better co-workers, better friends, whoever it might be, because we're able to go, yeah, I've done my stuff. Yeah, I can see that now. And those glasses that I said at the beginning, the lens is changing. The lens is seeing more clearly, and it just makes for more prosperity in our relationships.
Sam, I want to pick up on some of that. If we looked at, and sadly, if we look at the demographics of leaderships, particularly in this part of the world, but leaderships in general, it's still not 50-50. It should be 50-50, but it skews more to men of a certain age, particularly, in the C-suites. We look at the suicide statistics last year, 700,000 people committed suicide, 77% of them were men. Why is this so hard for us as guys, particularly if we're in that leadership position, to have this vulnerability, because we're told we're weak if we actually have these kind of conversations. Yet therapy should be about maintenance, in the same way that we go to the gym to look after our physical health, not necessarily about, I'm broken, I need you to fix me. Small question, I know, easy.
Yeah. We spoke about this the other day. I'm from New Zealand, and suicide statistics there are huge. Yeah. Male, teen suicide as well. And I think we spoke about, I had 3 friends that committed suicide when I was younger. All three guys. It's a huge thing, isn't it? And I'd probably defer to Charlie's expertise here as well. I'd love to hear your opinion, but a lot of the work I've done in my therapy has been, so transactional analysis stuff in terms of when I grew up, it was be strong, be the tough guy, right? Or don't be a wimp, or, words to that effect, right? And so that's something that I carried through, and I still catch myself doing it. So I'd be tough. And so that kind of...
Man up.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so that, we talk about these two things, like a person or being a human and then leader, as two separate things. Mm-hmm. They're not. Let's have it right, yeah? Like, being a leader is being a good human, right? And pushing for change in an organization or wherever leaders push for change, managers manage complexity. So bringing yourself into that, you're gonna bring all of your stuff. There's a great book by John Kabat-Zinn, Wherever You Go, There You Are. That is why, right, the struggles exist, because people bring the stuff that they've had in their childhood, as Charlie rightly pointed out, into their way of working. And the next thing you know, they've got, I have to be tough. And, I can't show weakness. And so, what's my option? Well, there's no other way out. And I mean, what a hugely sad place to be. I can't even imagine. But, just that ability to process that stuff and talk through that stuff and understand that that's not the only way to operate is key. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think building on exactly what you said, so without repeating, there is this idea of what we should be like. And especially in men, you can be a CEO, you can be highly financially successful and in your career, but you can still have low self-esteem. You can still feel that you're not worthy of that position. You can still feel that you're not good enough. And most of the time, as we see a suit or we see, someone who is perceived to be this successful exterior, but what's going on inside is they hold on to that identity of what that is, or men hold shame quite a lot. This is a powerful core belief that quite a lot of men have, and it's that there's something wrong with me. Like, if I can't communicate, or I can't be emotional, or the vulnerability maybe around their personal relationships. Shame is hugely damaging, and when we start to have that belief within our own minds, it's very difficult to kind of move that on our own without help. And some people would rather lose absolutely anything than just simply go, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Or apologize. Or because we in ourselves, we find these things so difficult to let go of, and we cling so tightly on, they actually end up sabotaging us a lot more. And men are very emotional. You are. The only problem is
I'm aware of this.
You've been taught and raised to suppress it. You've been taught and raised not to talk about it. Yep. And especially within your personal relationships, like, how many of you truly ever open up to develop a deep connection? How many of you are almost still self-protecting? Because if I'm truly emotional, or if I'm truly intimate with that connection, not sure about that one, right? So you don't. And then with everything else that might be happening in different areas of our lives, it becomes consuming. It becomes the fog. It becomes the clouds. And it becomes so overwhelming that we don't know how to escape. And you feel so trapped and so isolated. It becomes very overwhelming. So talk, reach out, pick up the phone.
Perhaps the DNA and the mission of Mentl is for us to have more open and honest conversations with it. And thank you, because that's really powerful words. I'm going to continue to use humour to deflect for now, while you've triggered me once again. Calvin, as we bring the podcast to a close, perhaps let's finish on a optimistic note, shall we say? What are you seeing out there that gives you hope that things are actually moving in the right direction? What are you seeing that either A works, that you would tell other companies, seen this, do that, or again, what gives you hope?
Yes, so the safe space is something that, it's kind of resonated with me today, is that it's something, I don't hear any companies talking about that. That is something that would be such a fundamental element to bring in for people like yourself to go in and actually open up that safe space to try and understand the people better, first of all. So that, for me, that's massive. And if you're looking at obviously mixing generations together in businesses, bringing Gen Z into the workplace, and that Gen Z, I feel, is more culture over compensation a lot of the time as well. So I think the benefits and what we see as a healthy work culture is going to change over time, and it's that which is the difficult part right now, because you've got the old school. Whether I'm a millennial, I think I'm classed as a millennial. I still got that old school mentality of, you know, you're strong and you don't want to open up too much. I find it hard myself to open up, even to my wife. You know, it's hard to do that sometimes because you've been conditioned in that way. Yeah. So I think in the workplace it's even harder. Yeah. With people you don't know, you're just trying to get in, get your job done, do a good job, get some recognition or whatever it is you're looking to do. So I think if we can get that right in the workspace, and what you're doing is amazing for that, you're raising the awareness of it. And I think it's a big thing in general society now is mental health. So I think it's only going to get better. So the more companies that adapt and understand that they're people, they bring in not just the flexibility, work from anywhere, because still you get the micromanagers that every 2 o'clock every day you have to log in and tell us what you're doing. Yeah. That's not really flexible working. It's understanding your team, understanding where you want to get to as a business, and making sure everyone's on side, which is going to take time.
Thanks, man. For the record, I'm Gen X. I'm not a boomer. My boy keeps calling me a boomer. I'm Gen X. Charlie, I'm going to, same sort of question to you. Again, what's giving you hope? Or what are you seeing out there that you feel is working and that we should do more of? You know, if there's the stop, start, continue, what should we continue and what should we stop?
I think we need to continue being advocates for the wellness movement. I think that we need to stop using it as a tick box exercise and actually delve into the deep stuff. And I think that the message needs to be passed on that vulnerability is actually true courage, and vulnerability is actually true bravery. And when we are able to be truly open and vulnerable, we actually can flourish.
Yep. That felt like a mic drop moment. But no pressure, Sam. You get the mic drop moment. Bring it home.
Nice one. Vulnerability builds trust. Businesses want trust, right? It doesn't go the other way. It's not, I'm going to get trust in, show some vulnerability. If you show that, you will build trust within your business. And I think what gives me hope is the changing way of being I've seen in leaders. Yeah. And I've spent a lot of time reading on this stuff recently, as we were talking about, and that kind of need to have a different way of being in business. I've seen it, and it's coming, which is amazing. And people are doing the work on themselves to say, okay, this is how I need to be as a human in order to be a better leader and to be there for my people.
Amazing. That was a pretty damn good mic drop moment there. That's, I think, all the time we've got on the podcast today. If you've enjoyed this podcast as much as I've enjoyed this conversation, please remember you can subscribe. If you want to find any more details about the Mentl Awards 2023, remember 2 finalists on the panel today. Check out the show notes. But also to the audience, I'd like to thank the audience today for being part of the Mental Space Live, our first live podcast. And please, if we could get a round of applause for my 3 amazing guests on the podcast today. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.